All right. We got a halftime score, my friends, and
Hello.
we got a game. We have got a game going on right now. Rough end of the first half. Lot to talk about in our inaugural Husker Gridiron halftime program. I was going to go grab one of those.
I figured I'd pop open one. I haven't had anything today.
I haven't either. I was thinking about doing the same thing myself, but I've been busy trying to get everything done. And then listen, that was a first half. A lot to react to in this first half. Thanks for joining us. We are live here on the Husker Gridiron halftime program. John Bishop, Josh Peterson from Unsportsmanlike Conduct. We're going to have plenty of reaction. If you want to react along, you can send comments and then.
Oh, sorry,
you can send comments. We'll put them up. You can watch along. And I guess my first takeaway, Josh, is this. The guys are playing hard. The guys are playing really hard. Obviously, that first drive was a huge lift for Nebraska to get them going. But I really like the second scoring drive because I think Nebraska got to doing what I think they're going to need to do in the second half. This Ohio State offense is starting to get it's had its rhythm all game with the passing game. But now we're starting to see some of the holes run up with the formations with the running backs. And I thought if Nebraska could do a good job containing the running backs, Fields is going to get his. But if Nebraska could contain the running backs and just get a modicum of a pass rush, they'd be in pretty good shape. But unfortunately, now the holes are starting to open up for the running back. So I really want to see Nebraska in the second half go back to what they were doing on that drive, the second scoring drive, a little more run, not quite trying to strike downfield for the big plays. But either way, Josh, I think if you're Scott Frost, you have to be happy with what you have seen from the effort and a lot of the execution, especially on offense in that first half.
Yeah, man, I could not agree more, especially when you consider that second touchdown drive came after like some really squirrely possessions for both them and for Ohio State, where it looked like things might get away from Nebraska. It was 2nd and 1 for Nebraska on, was it their second or third drive of the game? Their third drive of the game. They get to 2nd and 1, but then that penalty happens. Suddenly, then Ohio State gets the ball back. A couple plays later, there's that Justin Fields run where he should have gotten sacked like 2 or 3 times. He gets 5 yards. We see the replay. His knee was actually down. They go deep the next play. And so suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be one of those games. And so for Nebraska then, after not going down and scoring, to hold Ohio State on the following drive like they did, and then Nebraska avoids an interception on their subsequent drive. They get the touchdown. Yeah, this has been kind of like a feast or famine first half, I think, for Nebraska, John, where they have had some really impressive drives. And then they, on both sides of the ball, and then they have had some drives that have just not gone their way, whether it's penalties. Certainly they have had some that are very questionable. They have had some that are entirely their own doing. And I mean, I don't know, I am so surprised that the run defense is playing as well as they are so far. But yet the pass defense, like, what do you got for me in terms of what they're doing and how they're defending Ohio State? They're lined up so far off the ball that Justin Fields, it's a wonder. It's no wonder that he only has 1 incompletion so far in the first half.
Well, and the thing is, I think Nebraska's really respecting the speed on the outside, and they've run some pretty good routes. There was the play to Olave on I believe it was their second to last drive, the field goal drive, where it pretty much got Deontay Williams switched up on Olave as he passed him off, and then he cut in front of him and made that long completion. Nebraska's secondary is under a lot of pressure. They did have good coverage on the first drive, where they actually got a coverage. Well, it wasn't really a coverage sack, but it was close to a coverage sack in the first series. But other than that, it's been a struggle for Nebraska to cover this team. They've got to find a way to get a pass rush somehow. And, there have been a couple of times where they brought extra pressure and it got home, but it, again, took time to get home. If they can't heat up Justin Fields, he's got all day, to find receivers. And for the most part, he's had his will. The only incompletion of the first half was on that breakup by DiCaprio Boodle, where he went upstairs with Olave and knocked it out up high when he came down. But other than that, right now, Justin Fields and Graham Mertz are fighting for completion percentage leaders in the Big Ten Conference after 1 week. It's been impressive. His arm strength. and to exemplify that arm strength, how about the fourth down play on the first drive? Casey Rogers gets a clean piece of that football,
I know, man.
and yet it still has enough steam to hit the receiver
Brutal.
5, 6, 7 yards down the field on the run. He got enough of that ball where it should have probably been a deflected pass and a fourth down stop for the Black Shirts, and instead it didn't happen. But if I could fix one thing about the first half, it would be Nebraska finding a pass rush, some way to kind of heat up Justin Fields, especially on third and longs. Nebraska's had some third and longs that they have not been able to stop. And if I look at the stats here in the first half, third down conversions, Ohio State is 3 of 7. I'd be almost willing to wager that all 3 of those conversions were on 3rd and 5 or greater.
Yeah, they had, I think, 2 or 3 3rd and 1 stops in a row, and Ohio State ended up going. They had the one where they went for it late, and then they got called back because they weren't lined up. I could not agree with you more, because on the first drive of the game, Nebraska, there was a play where they like you said, they almost had a coverage sack. And Joe Clapp pointed out how good the defensive backs were doing, but you can only do that for so long. You can only hang out in the back end so long and still be okay. A couple things real quick. A lot of people are wondering, hey, Josh, what are you drinking? I'm Stone Brewing Enjoy by 103120 IPA. It's a really fun beer. Some other stuff, John. 13 points is the line. Ohio State minus 13 for the second half. 33.5 is the total. That's what I am seeing so far for half number 2 in Columbus.
Yeah, I mean, when you look back at some of the keys that we had to the game, Nebraska winning the first half, they did. They won the first, in terms of covering the spread ended up closing at 15.5. They obviously covered there. For a while there, it looked like Nebraska was only going to get outscored 10-7 in that quarter. Unfortunately, it ended up being 10-7. But for a while there, it looked like Nebraska was going to outscore Ohio State in the second quarter. Nebraska had not scored in the second quarter of any of the blowout losses that they had in the last 4 years. They scored 14 in the second quarter in this game 2 years ago. So I think Nebraska had, again, that drive. I go back to that scoring drive where Nebraska went down the field.
The second one?
The second scoring drive.
Huge,
where,
man.
It was a great drive. In fact, 11 plays, 78 yards, 517. I know that that's not necessarily the way that this offense is going to operate when it's at peak efficiency, but those are the types of things you're going to need to see in the second half. And how about using Luke McCaffrey as a running back? He has taken at least as many, I think, more snaps at running back than he has at quarterback. The official count right now is 4 snaps at quarterback. I think we set the total at 7.5 yesterday.
Yes, we're halfway there. I loved, man, that first drive. That play design was absolutely gorgeous. I was wondering if we would see Luke involved in the run game, because so often over the last few months we've talked about him as a wide receiver. So for them to do so like that, lining him up in the backfield with Adrian in a shotgun formation, especially on the first drive of the game, one of the first few plays of the game. I want to go back though to that second drive, because I was talking to some listeners throughout the first half, and one of the things that was asked of me is like, okay, it seems like Nebraska's defense isn't going to be able to stop them. Can this game will it be like a 56-21 type game? Will it be better? Will it be worse? And at that point in time, Nebraska had not scored again, and I was wondering, like, wow, have they used up all of their planned plays, the scripted first drive plays? Now how do they adjust? And so I thought, after a couple of drives that once again didn't go their way, some of it self-inflicted and some of it just really good Ohio State defense, for them to put together that drive. And I mean, I know Stoll got hurt, but they used multiple tight ends on that drive. They used the middle of the field. We've seen, I feel like in 30 minutes of football, we've seen Nebraska use the middle of the field more than they did for the entirety of 2019. And I'll be the 800th person to say it. Adrian looks so much quicker. He looks like he did as a freshman. I think he looks smoother as a runner right now. It sucks because Nebraska's down by 10 right now, and you can easily talk me into them being a much closer game, if not them having the lead. But you just keep going back to the defense and the pass defense not getting any incompletions except for that one that came with a couple minutes to go in the first half.
Now the official stats, Josh, have Martinez 7 of 9 for 72 yards, and they do keep track of targets. They did not give a target to the play to Travis Vokalek where he broke up the long pass. They, for some reason, I think they gave that target to Cade Warner. But if I'm to believe the Ohio State stats, the tight ends so far have been targeted 4 times in this game. Stoll has made 2 catches on 2 targets for 24 yards, and Austin Allen had a catch for 26 yards with 1 target. And then of course Travis Vokalek. They don't list him here, but Vokalek was the guy who was targeted when he broke up that long pass that probably should have been an interception. So yes, Nebraska using the tight ends. And go back, Josh, to the first play. Well, the first drive, the long run by Luke McCaffrey. They had Austin Allen lined up as the X receiver at the top of the formation. He came back in. Stoll actually came across the formation and got the chip on the edge, but Austin Allen came back on a crackback and took out 2 players on that same play. So obviously Nebraska knows that it's not tremendously deep at wide receiver. We saw, unfortunately, Wyatt Lever come in on his first series and pick up that very costly motion penalty, or illegal motion penalty, which cost Nebraska, instead of 2nd and 1, it turned to 2nd and 6, and Nebraska couldn't convert the first down. I think if they get that was on the 2nd drive, and they could have kept the momentum going, and who knows what might have happened there. But I think, Josh, what you're seeing is Frost and Matt Lubick realize what they have at tight end.
Yes.
You hope, you cross your fingers for Jack Stoll, but that did not look good with his leg planted, his foot planted, and then the hit coming in. It was not a dirty hit, but obviously he came in low to take him down, and unfortunately, I don't think it looks good for Jack Stoll. Hopefully we find out more information in the second half, because it definitely looks like right now that Matt Lubick is going to use his tight ends a lot more, because there's not a lot of other threats out there besides Wan'Dale Robinson on the edges.
A couple of things real quick. Jay Fugel on the YouTube comment section, he says, so much for the bell cow at running back. Yeah, Dedrick Mills, only 5 carries, 12 yards. He had a long rush of 8. He did have that touchdown near the end of the first half. I guess, John, I was surprised less by what he's doing per carry and more that they didn't go to him more, especially early. I know that I had a text or 2 with some friends throughout the first half saying, are you surprised that they're not even going to Dedrick Mills? And some of that, I mean, when you get behind the 8 ball, there was that one drive, where Adrian's, where his chin strap got all messed up. And so suddenly Luke came on the field. He got 3 straight snaps at quarterback. The first one was the first Mills carry of the day, and I think it was like a 4 or a 5 yard play to the negative side of things. Then the very next snap was muffed by Luke, and so he had to get down on the ball. And so suddenly then they're way behind the 8 ball. You can't really do a whole lot then. I do wonder how they get him involved, though, in the second half, because, he looks like a strong runner. I thought he looked pretty quick for the most part in the first half as well. But I agree with what you had to say. It really seems like they're going to want to get their tight ends involved. And even without Stoll, they still did so even more on that drive as it continued.
Some of the stats in the first half: Ohio State's out-yarded Nebraska by nearly 100 yards, 277 to 181. And the big difference has been in passing yards, 187 on 12 of 13. Nebraska, 72. But really, to me, Josh, the stat that stands out in that first half is penalties. Ohio State, 1 penalty for 4 yards, Nebraska 5 for 50, and we saw 3 very costly fouls there at the end. Certainly 2 of them were highly suspect. I thought the Markel Dismuke face mask was suspect because he was being held on the play, and then the pass interference that they called. Now, I guess I can understand why the official throws the flag. There definitely was contact, but the problem was the pass was not catchable. Unfortunately, it was thrown just close enough where I think it's going to be hard for an official to call it an overthrow or an uncatchable ball.
I wanted to see a different replay, because when they showed the replay, the only one that I saw, at least, as we were getting kind of set up for everything, was from behind it, so you could see like the play down the field. I wanted to see it from a more of a sideways angle, just to see how far over his head that it looked at that point in time.
It really wasn't that far over his head, but if you watch the field angle replay, he's not catching the ball. In fact, I think Joel Clapp mentioned it. I can't remember if it was I think it was Dismuke who had the best play on the ball. He was in a better spot. But again, even though I didn't like the call, I was upset about the call. I understand the call only from the standpoint of normally an uncatchable ball that waves off pass interference is very obvious, right?
Sure.
It's like several feet over a guy's head or several yards downfield. This one wasn't terribly overthrown, but based on where the coverage was, where the ball was, where the receiver was, that was not going to be caught in any way, shape, or form. So, unfortunately, Nebraska catches, I think, a bad break there. But
and
Nebraska's got to clean up those penalties, and they got to clean up the little penalties because right now
the delay of game one at the end of the first half, which put them behind the 8 ball, it's suddenly 1st and 15, and then that drive was essentially lost, and Ohio State gets the ball back, and they're able to make a 3-point game a 10-point game, and they get the ball first in the second half.
It's those two little 5-yard penalties. We talked about the motion penalty, the illegal procedure on the second drive that blew up a 2nd and 1, and then the one you just mentioned. So it's those little things, and unfortunately, when you're playing a team that is so good, especially on offense like Ohio State, you can't make those little mistakes. Nebraska's going to have to come out here in this second half, and unfortunately, Ohio State's going to get the ball first in the second half, and I think Eric puts it pretty well. If Ohio State marches down and gets a touchdown, takes a 7-point lead, this could be over. It certainly is anything but over right now, but I think this first drive, the first 2 series of this second half, Ohio State's first possession, Nebraska's first possession, is going to tell us if we're going to have a ball game to the end. But I will say this, they did accomplish the goal. They are making Ohio State work starting the second half. So that's something you can build off of. Now you've got to clean up the little things and finish strong. No matter what the score is, finish strong, because I think in that first half, you got a lot of stuff on film right now that you can look at and say, we've done some really good things here. I think this offense, when it's humming, looks very crisp. I just hope that they can incorporate a little more running back run game and grind out some drives, because I think Nebraska's offensive line
are getting pushed, man,
handling Ohio State's defensive line fairly well.
And let's talk about this too, because one of my biggest concerns all offseason long has been the run game on defense for Nebraska. Ohio State 90 carries on 24 yards, under 4 yards per carry. Meanwhile, on the other side for Nebraska, even with Mills only getting 2.4 yards per carry, and a lot of this is on that 47-yard rush by McCaffrey, but 18 carries for 109 yards, a shade over 6 yards per carry. That is the thing, honestly, of all the takeaways that I'm going to have, because you're right, Nebraska needs to clean some stuff up. They can definitely do some things better. Their run defense has really impressed me, John. They've had, I think, 3 or 4. Ohio State has 3rd and 1 plays, and I can remember off the top of my head 3 separate times where Nebraska was able to get a stop. And on that 4th and 1, where Justin Fields, where Ohio State, had a procedure penalty and it got called back, he barely got that first down. They have done a really good job in those short yardage situations. Their tackling has been better than I expected it to be. So if they can keep that up, and I mean, they got to get a turnover or two. I just don't think that they're going to be able to force Ohio State into a whole lot more punts at this point in time. They need something to go their way. The fact that it's a 10-point game, and we can name a bunch of little tiny things that Nebraska has done wrong or that have gone against them, and it's still only a 10-point game, it shows just the margin of error against a team like Ohio State. So can Nebraska eliminate those? And can they get a takeaway or two? And if they can keep up that run defense, man, I mean, this could be a game going into the fourth quarter. It just, they have to be kicking themselves, and hopefully they're not. Hopefully they're able to move on from it. But the end of that half, when it went from a 3-point game to a 10-point game, now Ohio State gets the ball and it could be a 17-point game. If that ends up happening, that drive with the delay of game coming off the kickoff is going to be the one I think that we look back and focus on and say, that's the one where it went wrong.
Yeah, and I mentioned this a little bit ago, but Nebraska for the most part has done a great job against the running backs. Master Teague with only 31 yards, but 16 of those came on his last 2 carries, including the touchdown there at the end of the first half. So I hope that Ohio State hasn't found something there in terms of the running game, because I agree with Joel Klatt. Ohio State's got to find a running game that's not named Justin Fields. Fields carried it 10 times in that first half. He's had almost half of their carries.
Yeah, he got hit a couple of times. He got up a little slow. And I don't know, we haven't mentioned this, and they didn't really talk about it on the broadcast. There was a play early in the game where Adrian got hit. He got up and was kind of messing with his left hand, his non-throwing hand. Obviously looked to be okay throughout the rest of the game, but both of the quarterbacks have taken a couple of good hits, but I think Nebraska's gotten some better ones on Fields throughout the game.
Yeah, there's like I said, that first drive, the first two series, Nebraska's first possession, Ohio State's going to get the ball first coming out of the break. So important to find some positive plays. And Nebraska, I'll be curious to see what Ohio State does. Do they still come out throwing? Obviously, they're able to get just about anything they want in the passing game. You look at where their targets have gone so far. Garrett Wilson's just having a monster game, five catches for 104 yards. Olave's got 71 on 4 catches. Those have been the two main guys. Everybody, they've got 9 of the 12 catches in the first half. So, what does Chenander do? Can you find a way to shift some coverage over to one or both of those guys? I don't know if you can, because right now, with the time that Fields is being afforded, Garrett and Wilson and Olave are being able to get open. So Nebraska's got to find pass rush in this second half, something just to disrupt the timing, because right now when Fields is allowed to be in the pocket, he's just way too comfortable.
Yeah, and Asian Joe says something along those lines. I'm assuming they're playing off the receivers and letting them have space underneath to avoid too many deep balls by Fields. Bend, but don't break scheme. Yeah, it certainly looks like that. But I understand why they're not playing up close, because they don't want then something to happen where they get beat by the deep ball. But weirdly, they're playing far off and they're getting beat by the short, the intermediate, and the deep ball so far. So I think something has to change there if Nebraska's defense is either going to force a turnover or get more than one stop. They need to force Ohio State into a couple of punts. It'd be nice if they could do so on this first drive.
All right, so there it is, our inaugural halftime program. The game has just kicked off for the second half. It's going to be a touchback. Don't forget, Gary and Damon have Big Red Overreaction live on 1620 The Zone, 1620thezone.com, and the Zone mobile app, also on 1019 The Keg. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the second half. We'll talk to you on Monday on Unsportsmanlike Conduct and 1620 The Zone.
Later, everybody.